Welcome to the Human Flourishing Project. I'm your host, Alex Epstein. Okay, today I'm going to do a pretty brief episode, which will be a question and answer. I put out a pretty late query for questions, and I got 3 questions, and they're all good ones, so I thought I'd take those on today. I'm working on a show on what I'm tentatively calling Seeking Superior Systems, which is how to find people who have really good systems in different areas of life that can make our lives a lot better. And I'm curious for your suggestions on people with those systems. But I still want to evolve my thinking a little bit, so that'll probably come next week. But if that intrigues you, be excited, because it'll probably be next week. Although certain things I keep delaying, like the ever-delayed psychologist, which has been delayed even a 3rd time, but we're supposed to talk in February. So that will happen. I'm still pursuing that, and maybe after next week's episode, you'll give me some suggestions for people who have really good systems, and I can talk to them. Okay, question number 1. How are your resolutions coming? I appreciate that question. I really like making public resolutions in that it creates a condition that reminds me that I told a whole bunch of people of what I had committed to. And my 2 specific public resolutions were, 1 was to, by the end of February, come up with a good financial plan, and 2 was to find a really good doctor. So both of those I've made considerable progress. And I should also say that I'm really happy that I've made progress in a lot of other goals, particularly in personal life this year, but also in work things, and that a lot of it I attribute to the time blocking I talked about last week. So if you didn't listen to last week's episode about time blocking, I highly recommend that. Oh, and also someone asked for a version of what I mentioned in terms of how I block time and how to visualize that. So I will share that. And my producer, Kelso, who's also my assistant, is in the room. So he's not going to speak up, but he's going to take a note to make sure that I share that in the coming week. Okay, how are those resolutions coming? Well, the financial one, I've started talking to some different financial advisors, and I have some initial plans to get at least one of them to make a plan for me, and I may get a couple of them. What I've learned is there are differences in terms of what financial advisors do, and some of them, sometimes to work with them, you need to invest a certain percentage of your money or invest money with paying them a certain percentage. And that's not something I'm ready to do right now, but some people who do that also will help you with just a financial plan for a certain fee. So my current idea is I'm talking to a couple of smart people, and if I can find a few people who can do plans at a reasonable price for me, it's worth it just to pay those people, just so I can get unique insights from each and see what's out there. So far, so good. That looks like I'll have at least one of those plans done by the end of February, hopefully more than one, and that it's already really, really interesting to just talk to people about it and to think about, what am I really looking for out of this? And the more I think about it, the more of what I'm really looking for is just how to think rationally about what to do with my money. And I don't think I can do that if I don't have a good understanding of what saving different amounts of money can do and how that compares to spending it in different ways today. It's pretty easy for me to say, today with a given amount of money, here are the things that I would like to do with it. For example, I really like living in a really nice place, particularly if that place is next to the beach. And I like anything that saves me labor, which is going to come up in a later question about having an assistant. And I certainly like Uber because that saves me labor. And I like certain kinds of really fun activities. And I'm not so into going out to fancy dinners and whatnot and spending a lot of money that way. So that's important to think about. But then it's, how do you think about those decisions and then also long-term decisions? So that's what I'm hoping to get out of these financial planners and their different frameworks, and I think I should make some good progress. And if I find out anything really good, then I'll tell you what I learn. Then the other resolution, which I've made less progress on, is to find a really good doctor, particularly a primary care doctor. Now, when I started reflecting on this, one thing I realized was part of this issue was there were a couple of things with my health that I wanted to get checked out. And one thing I had in mind was, well, I'm not sure I have the best doctor, so I got to find a really good doctor. But then I realized, well, actually, like, you have access to some pretty good people already. So first, make sure you go to those people and ask them about things, and then try to find other people. And but don't delay going to the doctor in the name of having the best possible doctor. So one thing I've done that wasn't explicit in the resolution is just get better at making doctor's appointments. So I have had a bunch of doctor's appointments set up really this week, and that has been very clarifying and helpful. So already making progress there, but still need to, in the month of February, find, talk to a couple of the potential people. And I got some really good suggestions on Facebook. If any of you have any suggestions for me in terms of services that provide really good doctors or specific people, if you know anyone in Southern California, or if you think somebody's so good that I should just fly to see them once in a while, I'm open to that as well. Definitely eager for any recommendations. Just email me at alex@alexepstein.com. Okay, next question. I forgot who asked this, so I'm sorry for not giving you credit. But you can see the person's name on the Facebook page. You have talked about the importance of understanding a listener or reader's context in order to be more persuasive. Do you have any new discoveries or insights in this area since episode 6, or when you developed the Extreme Clarity tool? I like this question. And I have a couple of thoughts, and some of these are not maybe discoveries, but they're things that are at least even clearer to me now and that may be useful for me to share. So number one is that I have an expression that I apply to this and to a lot of other things, which is respect the problem. So often there are just a lot of solving something is respecting the difficulty in solving it. And there is just a real difficulty in how do we put ourselves in the position of the person that we are communicating with. It's understandably hard, because really the skill that you would want to have is to be able to feel like they feel and to experience it as they experience it. But implicit in that is that they are experiencing things as them. That's the primary rightful focus that they have, is experiencing things as them. But you are also a them. You are a person, and your default is to experience things as you. And if you are creating something or writing something or sharing something, it's very understandable that in your mind, so much of what's going on is what you want in the situation. And it can be very, very hard to really put oneself in the position of another person. One example of where this is difficult is in starting businesses. You look at just different people starting businesses and what are their motivations for it. And there are a bunch of things, and some of these are healthy, some not, or some of them are healthy in certain contexts. But one is people really like to build things, and that's great. But nobody really cares that you want to build things. You have to build something that's really, really useful to somebody else. And it can be easy to get focused on, oh, well, this would be really fun to build. And look, I like writing. I love organizing things. I love building intellectual content. So I'm certainly very empathetic to the desire. Like, I just want to build something. And yeah, I really hope this person likes what I build, versus really getting in their head. There's also status. If I build this, or if I have success in this company, then that'll help my status in the world. This is one I'm less sympathetic to, and I think is rarely healthy, or at least not in the form that I stated it. But that's another really common thing. And people are thinking about, hey, if I do this, if I succeed in this way, if these people like me in effect, if they like my product enough to buy it, or my ideas enough to spread them or otherwise consume them, then I will be in a higher place in the world. That's a very understandable focus to have, but it's not a focus on the audience. Then there's also just financial security. Look, I want to make money on this book, or I want to make money on this speech. And all of this it's weird because I'm absolutely an advocate of self-interest, and thus I want to create things in a way that is in my self-interest. But when I'm creating something for consumption, I need to really make it as useful as possible for the consumer. And if I'm really going to be proud of it, I need to, as much as possible, view it from their perspective. But that is a hard thing to do. And one of for me, maybe the master of this that I'm aware of, and the master of many things, was Steve Jobs. And there's the story in the Walter Isaacson book, which I don't think is very good or accurate, but there's a story that is supposed to make Jobs look pretty bad. And I wish I had thought to put this in front of me, but my recollection of it is, you can go check for yourself in the book how accurate this is, but Steve Jobs is hammering somebody about how this menu doesn't look very good, and they just say, well, this is just a menu. And he says, do you understand? Somebody's going to be looking at this every single day. And that just stood in my mind as, wow, this guy is really putting himself in the position of the user. He really cares that the user has an amazing experience with what he's created. And that's so rare. As many people are in business as are, and as many people are trying to communicate as are, so few people are really trying to create something that somebody else will love, in part because it's so hard to put yourself in their position. So this is all under the banner of respect the problem. If we're aware of all of the inherent difficulties in this, then we're going to be willing to do a lot to change our mindset so that it becomes more natural to us, or even if it's not natural, do deliberate things. Now, in terms of some of the deliberate things we do, you might notice that I mentioned the term useful a lot. And I have a whole talk that I gave at the Objective Standard Conference, and I'm pretty sure if you search Alex Epstein Objective Standard, you'll probably see this. There's one talk about the broader Human Flourishing Project, but then there's also one on, it might be keys to communication, but the key idea is usefulness. And I talk about how empowering it's been to me and how transformative it's been to me to really think about often the standard that I use to think about my communication, besides truth, is this useful? Because when I think of it in terms of usefulness, it causes me to think of a lot of things that are very, very valuable. It certainly includes things like clarity. It includes things like persuasiveness, but it really includes when somebody encounters whatever I'm giving them, in my case, ideas, their life is going to be better, and they're going to see how their life is better. So it can be a very useful, that's funny, thing to say, to ask yourself when communicating, when writing something, is this really useful to somebody else? Will they really find what I'm saying useful, versus I have a goal that I'm trying to impose on them, and they're just a character in my play, and I just want them to go along because that'll help me. And so the useful standard can be very useful. Two more. One, the second one, which I got from a guy named Leonard Peikoff, who's a very, very smart guy and connected very closely with Ayn Rand, whom I'm a huge fan of, to say the least. And he was her top student and her heir, actually. He had this really great course, which you can still find on the internet. It's called Objective Communication. I think this is where he said it, because I heard so many of his courses, and I'm not exactly sure where he said the following, but it might not even have been that, actually. But he said once that the best way to read or listen to something, if you're trying to consume your own content and be objective about it, He said you should read it as if it's written by somebody that you vaguely dislike. Written by somebody that you vaguely dislike. I hope I haven't told this before. If I have, well, I guess it's worth retelling. This is really, really useful because think about if you read it as if it's somebody you hate, then you're just going to find fault with everything and it's not going to be constructive and you won't even read it. And if you read it as if it's a loved one whom you're rooting for, then you're not putting yourself in the position of another person. But if you can err a little bit and think, I vaguely dislike this person, or at least I feel a little bit competitive, I'm going to really be hard on it in terms of I'm not going to be interested in it by default. I'm not going to find it persuasive by default. I'm not going to find it useful by default. But if it's really that good, I'm going to begrudgingly admit, wow, this is pretty good. That's a good thing to subject one's own work to just have a little bit of, I don't know if hostility is the word, but to just really be not rooting for the person, but so I'm giving them a chance, but I'm not even giving them 100% fair chance. I'm really making them impress me. I'm really making them create something that will be useful to me as the reader. So if I can look at my own stuff as if it's written by somebody that I vaguely dislike, that can help me put myself in their position. A third thing, hope is a bad sign. Sometimes we'll write something, this often happens with marketing copy, and we'll think, gosh, I hope they like this, or I hope this resonates with them, or I hope they want to buy my product or hire me or something. And that's a sign that the job is not yet done. If we send something to someone and we feel like, I don't know whether this is persuasive anymore, but I'm tired of it, or I really want it to work, that's not a good sign. Because here's a metaphor that I find very useful in communication. If you think about those 10-cylinder bike locks where it's kind of a cheap bike lock, but it's got these 10 cylinders on the outside and you twist them all, and the idea is you have to get them all right. If you get even one of them wrong, you get 9 right, 1 wrong, the thing doesn't open. It's basically as useless as if you had gotten all 10 wrong. But if you get them all right, then everything opens up. And in many ways, persuasion is like this. There are all these things that have to happen well, and when they all happen, it's amazing. But sometimes just one little thing, it seems unfair, but it'll not work. So maybe you make an amazing argument, but you come across as a jerk. Even something like that. Or you make an amazing argument, but you're too quiet and nobody can hear you. That's a big one then. I've had to, that's another one actually I got from Leonard Peikoff, which is funny because he's so intellectual. I remember him saying something to the effect of, the most important thing in being a great speaker is, it was you can be heard, which I thought was so funny, but it's just such a true point, because if you can't hear somebody, then it's just painful. It's the opposite of useful. It's a painful experience. So when I can put myself in the position of reading something as if I vaguely dislike it, I feel like I'm on the right track. If when I'm creating it, I'm feeling a lot of hope, that's a bad sign. Maybe I'll give a talk sometime on hope, because hope has a huge amount of danger to it. It is a 4-letter word in the worst sense in so many different ways. But I'm not prepared to go on that rant right now, so I'll just say in communication, I do not want to be having a lot of hope. I want to be more feeling like, wow, if I were the reader, man, I do not know how I would ignore this. This is just a dream come true. The closer we can get to that, the better. So respect the problem, use usefulness as a standard, read or consume my own content as if it's written by somebody or created by somebody I vaguely dislike, and then be aware of hope as a bad sign. Okay, question 3. This came from Keith Didion. I think Didion. I think that's how it's spelled. I've never heard his name pronounced, but let's just say Keith Didion. I would love to know more about having an assistant, what kind of things you delegate, how you find one, part-time or full-time, anything you can tell us. Okay, this is something that I know a lot about, and I have a lot of experience at it, and it's been a fun topic in my life. My first experience with this. I've told this story in a different context, but there is a person I very much like and am grateful to named Marianne Wenninger. And she, in 2011 or 2012, believed a lot in the mission of the Center for Industrial Progress, the organization that I was starting. And she offered to volunteer her time to be an assistant. And at the time, this was almost an alien thing to me. And she just said, well, you can have me do anything, just whatever an assistant would do. And I told this story a long time ago, but I ended up having her do things like remind me to clean up my office space and things like that. It was just that was where I was really discovering the power of having an accountability partner as a condition in one's life. And since then, I've had different kinds of assistants. I've had remote assistants, in-person assistants, and I've had a lot of success with them. And I've had, in the past several years, I've had very, very good situations with assistants. So here's my number one guideline here, and I'll give you some examples that you might find extreme to the point of being amusing, but I think they're all good, is be enormously creative and selfish in delegation. Be enormously creative and selfish in delegation, which means really think about what would be great if somebody else could do for me. Like, what do I not want to do? If I could somehow get somebody else to do for me, what would I love them to do for me? And people can be very inhibited. You might think, well, I don't have enough money for this, or that might be weird. Just forget all of that, because there's a lot of things that can be, there's just a lot of things that are possible that you might not know about. It's just worth thinking about everything, and then you can always scale it back as necessary. So here's just a couple of things that my current assistant, Kelso, does. And now Kelso is an in-person assistant. In the last several years, I've had two major assistants. One is Nikki, who's amazing and currently helps with my bookkeeping, but is no longer my personal and work assistant, which those jobs go together for me. And she was amazing. Her only drawback was she was remote. And now Kelso, who works with me now, he's my assistant and he's in person. And what I found is in-person assistant, if you can get that and afford that, you don't want to go back from that, because there's so much that you can accomplish with an in-person assistant. So you might want both. Some people have 3 assistants. I think that can be great. But there's something about having somebody really good. That's part of what Nikki helped me discover. And then just having somebody good and near, which is what Kelso has helped me with. That is a really big deal. So I don't think I'll ever, as long as I can afford it, I will not go back, and I will do a lot to be able to afford it. So there's just food preparations. I just don't want to prepare my food. Now, you can, with all of these, you can say, oh, I love this, it's my passion. Fine. If that's true, but then only do it when you're thinking about this. Only think about, when is food preparation going to be super, super fun for me? Not just, oh, I want to do all of it because it's my passion. That's unlikely. Packing. So whenever I go on a trip, he's got a list and he packs everything and gives me instructions and whatnot. Screening my email. This is a really big thing, of screening and sorting email, because email is this very varied communication that can take all these different kinds of forms. And it's certain kinds of things are urgent, but most aren't. And then certain things need to be sorted through, certain things need to be handled by other people. By helping me manage these communications and really only see what I need to see when I need to see, that's incredibly valuable. And I do think of the primary job of a work assistant is to be a communications assistant, to make communication more efficient for the person being assisted. He can do projects. So there's a project that I want to apply some of the KonMari and other principles with items in my office, which is the same building. Basically my office and my house go together. I have a home office, so helping me with that. He handles Apple Store stuff. That turns out to be a very big deal, because weighting Genius Bar stuff, even though they're good, can be a total pain. So that's really, really nice. I have him drive me a lot. It's preferable to Uber in that for certain things, having your own driver can be very nice. For example, I can have a much wider range of work conversations there because he's an employee of mine who's bound to, he works for me. So he's as we have a contract, he's bound to certain kinds of, conditions, and thus I can talk about work stuff around him. I can make much tighter connections. So I can leave at an exact time and know that I'll get to jujitsu class, and then I can leave jujitsu right when I'm ready to leave for jujitsu. And just all these little eliminations of friction are a pretty big deal. So maybe those sound abnormal, but I'll give you some even more abnormal just to give you a sense of what's possible. Now, most of these are very specific to me, but think about what you could imagine where it would be if you could just have anyone who would do anything reasonable that you asked them to do. What would it be? So here are some specific ones, and I'll save the one that a friend of mine thinks is funniest for last. So one of them is lifeguarding. I live right next to the beach, and I go out swimming a lot when other people aren't swimming, particularly now that it's January. There aren't that many people there, and sometimes there are some decent waves. And I just think, well, I would like to have somebody watching me when I'm swimming because it'd give me some peace of mind. I could always hit my head on a rock or something, and that could be life and death. So I have Kelso come out, and he just gets to hang out on the beach for 15 minutes while I swim. And that's a pretty good job for him, but it gives me a lot of peace of mind. Another thing is jiu-jitsu drilling. So sometimes I want to practice something in jiu-jitsu, and that can involve strangulation, and Kelso's a good sport. He's pretty athletic, and he actually has a pretty good knack for jiu-jitsu when I'll teach him something. So if I want to practice different moves in jiu-jitsu, then sometimes I'll get Kelso to do that. So that's an unusual kind of thing. And then one that really strikes people as unusual is that sometimes I'll pay Kelso to come one-wheeling with me on rejuvenation break. So one-wheeling, if you haven't heard the show before, is this unbelievable board, an electronic skateboard, but it feels very much like a snowboard on land, and it's just super, super fun. And sometimes I'll want to go on a one-wheel excursion to some place I'm not familiar with, and sometimes it'll be in the hills where, if I were to take a bad fall, maybe some people wouldn't see me for a while, and who knows what could happen. And also, it's just kind of fun to have someone else there. So I started having Kelso plan one-wheel trips, like, hey, find a place to go and then come with me. And I have a couple of one-wheels so he can, and he's pretty good at it, so he can ride. And then just to give you how extreme I am in terms of delegation, I realized that I liked having someone there, but I didn't like having someone right next to me usually, because I like the kind of isolation of being on a one-wheel, and I actually enjoy whistling to myself on a one-wheel. So I told Kelso, okay, come with me, but you got to stay 100 feet back or something like that, so I can just whistle to myself and have that privacy. And I have a friend named Jeremiah, and I told him this, and he just thought this was the funniest thing, that you're paying somebody to one wheel with you so that you can, he would have a better way of putting it, but so that you're basically paying somebody so that you can whistle on your one wheel, and that is a kind of unusual thing. But why not? It's a great use of money because it's very rejuvenating, and I feel safer, and that safety makes it more enjoyable, and I get my privacy just by making it just so. So hopefully, Keith and others, you like that answer. The key is being enormously creative and selfish in how you're thinking about your delegation. And if you can do that, then more and more of your life can be spent as you really want it to be spent. And I take a lot of pride in the fact that there are very, very rich people who do not get nearly as much out of their money as I do, because I use resources I try to use them very, very efficiently to buy me as much discretionary time as I can. And that means time doing what I want, when I want, exactly in the way I want to do it. And I really like that. So that is worth a lot. And an assistant is so valuable in allowing me to live that way and can allow you to live that way. Now, there are different kinds of services, and I unfortunately don't know the landscape because I've been fortunate enough to have my current people for a while, and Kelso I just knew through family friends. So if you could find somebody in your area that's really good, that you have a good relationship with, that's useful, there are probably good guidelines for how to deal with assistance. I think the main thing is you should like the person. That's a big one. They should like you because they're going to be doing a lot of things. And they should really, you should communicate that you value what they're doing and how they're doing it. And also they should value what you're doing enough to think that it's a good use of time to help somebody with that. So if they think that what you're doing in life is just you're a loser or you're just spoiled, that must make it a lot less pleasant. But if they think, hey, you're doing cool things and they're assisting you in doing those things, I imagine that feels much better. And then, of course, there are just general things of how you treat anybody in terms of just having respect for people and not viewing oneself as superior in any fundamental way, and just viewing it as, okay, I have my own goals and they have their own goals, and their life is just as important to them as mine is to me. And so just always remembering that you're not a king. So you're somebody who's eager to pay them to help you, and they're somebody who's eager to help you for pay, but you're traders. You're not superior. And I can imagine, I've seen many people deal with assistants in a superior way, and that's a mess. But then you also don't want to deal with them in a deferential way. They are your assistant. It is their job to empower you and make sure they do a good job. Okay, that was a fun question to answer. It's a fun thing to have. So I hope that I'm saying I hope a lot. Maybe I'll stop doing that. But that's funny because I do say I hope a lot. So that I'll reflect on that. Okay, that is it for today. I really keep feeling compelled to say I hope. That's so interesting to me. Maybe I'll do a show on that. So we will be back next week. I'll be back next week. Hope that you enjoyed this one. And if you have any questions, comments, love mail, or hate mail, email me at alex@alexepstein.com. Go join the conversation on Facebook at facebook.com/The Human Project, or rather, facebook.com/Human Project, and subscribe to weekly emails with updates on when the show is and when new ones come out at humanflourishingproject.com. Okay, I will be back next week with a new episode, hopefully on seeking superior systems. Until next time, I'm Alex Epstein. This has been the Human Flourishing Project.